looking for. One more. Okay. All right. Well, welcome to all who are out there. And this webinar is called Features of Web Analysis. And in it, you will learn about some of the features of web analysis and a brief comparison of web analysis to SmartView. My name's Craig Messenbring. Welcome again. I represent HCG. We're a company that provides consulting and training services for business intelligence software, specializing in the Oracle Hyperion EPM space. And we're based out of the Twin Cities area of Minneapolis and St. Paul, where it started out today at about 0 degrees this morning. As I said, HCG provides consulting, education, and support and development services, and we're an Oracle Certified Gold Partner with an Oracle-approved education center in beautiful Phoenix, which I'll be visiting next week. We provide many different training formats and consulting support and development services to meet your needs. So the intent of this webinar is for those who already know what Essbase and SmartView are, but are curious to know about what web analysis can do and when and why you might choose web analysis over SmartView. So I'm going to get started with a bit of a lengthy exposition here on this page, but don't worry, we'll get into real live demos here in a moment. So before we get started with the features of web analysis, let's talk a little bit about what Essbase is, and then get an overview of how SmartView and web analysis differ in their usage of and reporting on data originating from an Essbase database. And as with all overviews, this is a simplification of what each is, but it's a good starting point for understanding the differing capabilities of each when used for accessing and reporting on data from an Essbase database. So, simply speaking, Essbase is a database, and SmartView and web analysis are two of many tools used to retrieve and display data from Essbase. I'm making this comparison because hopefully many of you are at least somewhat familiar with SmartView and can use this as a basis from which to make a comparison with web analysis. What is Essbase? It's a multidimensional database. A multidimensional database has more than 2 dimensions available than the 2 dimensions available in a relational database, and is designed for rapid retrieval and analysis of that multidimensional data without having to go out to multiple relational tables, join them together to produce the same result. What's a dimension? Well, I like to think of it simply as a description of part of your business. Some examples are you probably are going to have a product dimension, a customer dimension, the time frame in which you sell products, the measures that you are measuring like profit and sales, and different data scenarios like actual, budget, and forecast. And within Essbase, each of those dimensions is designed hierarchically, giving you varying levels of detail. The simplest example is a time dimension is probably going to be arranged hierarchically so as to display years of information, quarters within those years, months within those quarters, and so forth and so on as needed. And so the design of multiple dimensions and the hierarchy of those dimensions allows the retrieved data to be zoomed in for more detail, zoomed out for less detail, sliced and diced for easy selections of certain portions of the database that are desired, and pivoted for viewing of the same data from multiple perspectives. SmartView and its somewhat functionally equivalent product called the spreadsheet add-in, which you may be familiar with, were designed for rapid retrieval and analysis of data from a multidimensional database. It's mainly used as a spreadsheet reporting and analysis tool within Excel. Thus, the output of SmartView is primarily in the form of a spreadsheet, although more visual views of the data, like charts, can be obtained by the use of Smart Slices and the report designer tools available within SmartView. Whereas web analysis has its own web-based studio from which you create what are called documents, which contain spreadsheet reports, different data objects as they're called, but also you can easily view the data in charts and pinboards and easily add controls like option buttons, checkboxes, and drop-down lists that can be used to change the data displayed. Okay, that's a lot of words. Here's an example of a SmartView report, but I'd rather do something live here. So I'm going to go over to this machine here, and I have to scroll down a bit and grab from it little Microsoft Excel here. Here I've already connected to a five-dimension multi-dimensional database where I've got a year dimension, a measures dimension, a product, market, and scenario dimension. And I'll build a report, as you saw very briefly on the slide. So if I take the year dimension, I can do things like zoom into it. Let me scroll this back up a little ways here. So I'll zoom into the year dimension. I decide I only want to keep Q1, so I do a keep only command. And then I'm going to zoom into Q1, so I've got the 3 months within Q1 and Q1 itself. I also want some products in my report, so I'm going to drag these products from this thing called the point of view toolbar and zoom in on it. And maybe I don't want all of the products, so I'm going to get rid of diet and products using a command called remove only. And then up here I've got my measures dimension, and I'll zoom in on it also. And maybe I'll keep the profit and the ratios, so I'll do a keep only after doing a control click on those. And I'll zoom in on profits. I'll do a keep only on margin here and ratios for a moment. And then I'll zoom in on margin, and I'm going to zoom in on ratios also. And let me see, I think I'm going to keep sales, cost of goods sold, and profit percent. So I'm just control clicking there and doing a keep only. And I think I have a report similar, except for the number of decimal places, to what you were very briefly viewing here on the presentation. So that's an example of creating a spreadsheet report from S-based data using SmartView. And you can see how easily and quickly I created that analysis. Well, guess what? We can do essentially the same thing in web analysis, where once again you see the months and Q1, you see the product groupings here, and you see the different members from the measures dimension I selected there. And once again, it's much handier if you see it live. So I'm going to come back here to my remote desktop and go to web analysis. I've already logged into web analysis, but I've got in my view pane over here a connection to a database called Sample Basic. And if I just double click on it, I start my initial analysis within web analysis. And once again, it looks pretty much like a spreadsheet, and it's going to for a little while, but just bear with me. And within the year dimension, if I just double click on it, I zoom in on year, but I only want to keep Q1, so I'm going to select Q1, right click and do a keep only on it, and then I'll double click on it to zoom in on it. There, I've got that. I'll double click on measures. I'll double click on profit, double click on margin, double click on ratios, and then do some removals. It's not so easy in web analysis to do keeps and removes because you can only do one item at a time. So thus, some of the ad hoc analytic capabilities of web analysis are a bit more difficult than they are in SmartView. I'm going to keep on doing remove onlys here until I get what I wanted, and it looks like I lost what I wanted. So one more time, I'm going to do a remove only on that one, remove only on that one, and 3 more. But I'm missing that product dimension. And so right now I happen to be in this thing called Analyze View. I'm hovering over the button that you can see that is pressed. I'm going to go to this other button that's called Navigate Data Source. And right now in my rows area, I've got the year dimension. In my columns area, I've got my measures dimension, but I also want my products in my rows area. So I bring that down there and it says, well, which products do you want? And let's say I pick these 4 product groupings, and they happen to be displaying the aliases or descriptions as they're called here in Web Analysis. I'll go back to the actual member names themselves to make it exactly the same as the report in SmartView. And when I click on OK and OK, you see that I've got essentially the same report except for one thing. My product groups were on the outside of my months before, so if I just drag my months and quarter over the top of my product groups, they switch or pivot as it's called, and now I have essentially exactly the same report as I did in Excel. Okay, great. I've got 2 tools to do exactly the same thing. Why would I want Web Analysis? Well, one reason is the charting capabilities within Web Analysis are much easier than they are within SmartView. And I'll go and demonstrate that right now. Come back here, and now notice that the display command, the display menu item says spreadsheet right now. Spreadsheet is checked, but I can switch it to a chart. Any one of a number of charts. I'll make it simple and just select a bar chart here. And now you see that I have the same view of the data as before, except in a bar chart. But my outside row dimension, which was my products, has turned into my page members. So this is a chart of just the product 100 data for my sales, cost of goods sold, and my profit percentage for my various months and quarters. But I can switch it via the drop-down list, and you didn't see too much visual change there, but hopefully you're going to see a little something flash on the screen. The bars aren't changing all that much, but the data is definitely changing. If I want to go back to my spreadsheet view, I go back to my spreadsheet view via this display command. Okay, easy charting, that's one nice thing. But here's something else you can do. You can actually combine a chart and a spreadsheet on one display. I'm going to go to this thing called the Document Wizard, and I'm going to have to connect to a database. So I'm going to browse and connect to this database called Sample Basic. And then with this wizard, it's going to ask me a number of questions like, what do you want in your rows? Well, I want my year in my rows, and I also want my product in my rows. And then it says, what do you want in your columns? Well, I want my measures in my columns. Next, I'm not going to worry about page dimensions. I'm not going to worry about filters at this point. But at this point on step 6, I can say, do you want to see that in a spreadsheet, or do you want to see it in a chart, or a combination of spreadsheets and charts separated vertically or horizontally? So I'm going to go with this vertical combo here and do a finish. And it's quite boring at first because guess what? I haven't zoomed in to get what I wanted here. So let me zoom in on year here for a moment. And then I'll zoom in on product. And once I zoomed in on product, you see the multiple bars in the bar chart because the inner row specifies the bars that you're going to see here. And the outer row, quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, and year, are my pages. So then I can switch the data from quarter 1 to quarter 3, etc., and both the bar chart and the numbers in the spreadsheet, like 7048 is at the top. Now it changes to, no, it didn't change to. Okay. Oh, it's 704. I've got all of the quarters specified in the spreadsheet above, so no, that doesn't change. My mistake there. But that's an easy way of creating a combination of a chart and a spreadsheet in what they call a document here. Now, we go back to the presentation for a moment. So I went through the the wizard and created a vertical combo of a chart and a spreadsheet, as you saw there. And now we're going to do some more analysis and some more visualization of our data by starting out with something called traffic lighting. And traffic lighting just separates items into different colors based upon the values. And so we need a column of data that we're going to traffic light on, and some other items here. And I'll try to recreate that live, so bear with me here. I'm going to get rid of a couple things here. Actually, I think I'll start from the scratch again. I'm going to double click on Sample Basic again, which creates me another document to start from. And once again, I'll zoom in on year, keep quarter one, zoom in on quarter one. In this case, I'm going to get rid of quarter one, keep that. I'll go into my measures, do a keep only on profits, zoom in on profit, do a keep only on margin, zoom in on margin, and get rid of margin here. I'm going to keep it very, very simple here. And then I'm going to go back into my data layout and bring something else over to the rows area, my products again. So I'll drag my products down to the rows area and select my IDs and select products 1, 2, 3, and 400. I'll try to make it similar to the presentation so that when I go back to the presentation, they'll both look essentially the same. But what I want to do is add traffic lighting so that I get different colors, as you see here. Sorry about that. So I'm going to right-click on sales here, and you'll see that there are a number of analysis tools available, like traffic lighting, sorting, top and bottom only, calculations, etc. I'll show you a few of each of those. So I want a traffic light, and I want a traffic light on the sales column and compare it to a fixed value. And looking at my fixed values right now, it looks like most of them are 8,000. Some of them are 6,000 and 7,000. I'll say anything above 8,000 will be green. Anything above 7,000 will be yellow, and anything below 7,000 should be red. And there you see the one that's above 7,000 but not above 8,000 is yellow, the ones below 7,000 are red, and the rest of them are green for traffic lighting. And that was relatively simple to apply. And now I have another visualization of my data which makes things more clear to some people. And I can also then decide if I want to sort the data. So if I right-click and go to my analysis tools again and sort the data, I can say I want to sort on my sales column, and I want to do a descending sort. Right now, you'll see that each grouping of January, February, March, well, let's make sure. It looks like let's go with an ascending sort, because right now it looks like they're pretty much descending. I guess not. 200 is greater than 100. We can still go with descending. So I'll click OK there, and now you see that product 200 is above 100 for January, above 100 for February, and above 100 for March in this data example 3. So the sorting was easy to apply. And then some people might say, well, I only want the top 2 within a certain range of data. So I'm going to go and retrieve only the top or the bottoms. On my sales column, I'm only going to retrieve the top 2. And the top 2 doesn't mean I'm going to retrieve only 2 items here. I'm going to retrieve the top 2 items for each of January, February, and March, because I have multiple row headers, I should say. And there you have the top 2 for January, February, and March. As simple as that. Unfortunately, everything is green now, sort of ruining our traffic lighting. But be that as it may, you can see how easy it is to sort. And then what if I want to add other calculated fields Well, I can add other calculated fields through another analysis tool called calculation, where I can say, let's say my profit, so I'll name this calculated field profit, is going to be my sales, which I just double-clicked on, and I clicked on the minus sign, and it's going to subtract the cost of goods sold from my sales. And when I click on OK there, I now have a profit column with the calculated values there. All right, so I showed you a little bit about traffic lighting, a little bit about sorting data, very simple. Top and bottom retrieves. Let's get more visual with the data. And I showed you calculations. And now to get more visual with the data, I'm going to create a pin board for you. And a pin board is a visual display of data with a background picture and some pins, and those pins reflect the data, but the pins reflect the data based upon the color of the traffic lighted data that you're doing the pin board on. So I need to go back to my source data one more time here and create a better looking pin, traffic lighting than what I've got right now. I'm going to go into sales one more time here and apply traffic lighting again to this, but I'm going to change our fixed value that we're comparing to. Anything above 8,700 will be green, and anything above, what, 8,400 will be yellow. I'm just grasping at straws here a bit. And anything below that will be red, and hopefully I've got green, yellow, and red, and yes, I do. Okay. So now I want to create a pin board. And guess what? I can do that via this display menu item and create a pin board. Well, that's not a very good looking pin board because a pin board probably has to have some sort of background image on it. So I'm going to set a background image on it. I have to dig deep into a hierarchy to find one here for a moment. Just bear with me. And I've got a JPEG here. That's just a map. Now, when I did my selections of what I was pinning on, I selected January, February, March instead of East, West, South, and Central. But let's just pretend these are East and West and South or something like that. East, Central, and Midwest and West. And I drag those pins onto my pin board background wherever I want them. And I can change the pin image. The automatic pin that you get with the product is a pin, but if you want to change the picture of what the pin looks like, you can certainly do that. You can change what the colors are of the pins based upon your traffic lighting instead of green, yellow, and red. But I'm just going to leave it at that right now. And now I have a pin board with my pins based upon the data, red, red, and yellow for product group 100. If I go back to my spreadsheet here for a moment, product group 100 was red there, and yellow for March. Back to pin board, same thing, red, red, and yellow for January, February, March. So that was just a quick view of what you can do with pin boarding. Better example here on the presentation where I did use East, West, South, and Central as my row members. And once again, I used my sales column as my traffic lighting. I set up the background image, dragged the appropriate pins of East, Central, South, and West to the pin board, and once I clicked on OK, those were my values as you see the same colors here. 2 greens, 1 red, and 1 yellow. Now, up to now you've seen a spreadsheet, a chart, a combination of a spreadsheet and a chart, and a pin board. But Up to now, you could either display the spreadsheet or the chart or the pinboard or the combination of the chart and the spreadsheet. What if I want to do more than that? Well, that's when it comes to something called the document designer. The document designer is used to combine many objects together. Data objects like spreadsheets, charts, freeform grids, which I won't get into, and pinboards. Various visual objects just for displaying text kind of things or picture kind of things. I've got things called labels, text boxes, and images, and then certain data controls, which I'll show you, like combo boxes or check boxes or option buttons, and then even some service execution buttons, whatever that means. So first, I'll show you an example of a document designed with the document designer. This document, and I'll show it to you live in a moment, but this document contains many things, like an image, like these things called service buttons. When you press on them, something's going to happen. There over on the right-hand side is a spreadsheet. Here you saw a pinboard, very similar to what we just saw with pinboards, except with a different pin, now round-headed pin instead. Another image just to display there, and combined with a chart down here at the bottom. And to show that live, I need to find it here. I have to go to my view area, to groups, all sales, with lightning-like speed here, desktop, sample, WA, and finally to this TBC samples area, which you're not really seeing. And in here I'll show you the same item we just saw, this thing called regional analysis. And to make it the complete view of the whole thing, I'm going to get rid of this view pane on the side by going to View and unchecking View pane. And there you can see the image and this thing called, and this image up here, and the pinboard and the spreadsheet and the chart, and these service buttons here, where if I now click on a different button here, it's actually going out and getting another document and displaying that document for me, this thing called the KPI scoreboard. And you can see that the KPI scoreboard was opened from the regional analysis document. So how does one go about creating these items? And the answer lies in, if I go to File, New Document, you notice I've got sort of a grid display here. And you might notice over on the far right, this button was pressed before, Analyze View. But now I'm in this Document Designer view, and I've got an entirely different set of buttons that I can work with. And I can bring things in. I'll just do one at a time very briefly. Here's a label. This is a label, if I can spell properly. And I'll bring in a text item. So this is text. And you might be wondering, what's the difference between text and a label? And the answer is this. Whenever I want to see how this document really functions in the real world, I switch back to Analyze View. And when I do that, when I click on this as a label, I cannot type over it. But on the text item, I can actually go in here and change the text as I see necessary or the user sees fit. If I go back into the Document Designer view, I can do more things like, let's bring in a spreadsheet. So I'll drag this button down here and create a spreadsheet. It says, well, you've got to attach to some data source. So I'll once again attach to my sample basic database. And once again, select things like, what do I want in my rows and columns? I'll bring my year down here and display maybe 4 quarters. And my products over here, and maybe display those first 4 product groups. And click on OK. And there I've got a spreadsheet. And I can put that spreadsheet wherever I want. I can resize it, etc., etc. So I'll bring that and move it over here. And then I'll bring in a chart. Now I could create this chart from a different data source if I wanted, but I'm just going to use the same data sources I had before, and once again I've got a chart. As simple as that, and I can move it wherever I want on this document. And if I want a pin board, I can bring in a pin board from that same data source again, but pin boards require traffic lighting, so I'm going to do traffic lighting on my product dimension here. And I have to specify my values for green, yellow, and red again. So looking at the data, I'll say anything above 8,000 is green. Anything above 7,500 is yellow. And see what I come up with. I need a background. Once again, I'm going to go to that background. Once again, I probably should have selected markets as my rows, but I didn't. So I'm just going to go with it. And drag my pins around. Let's pretend this says east, west, south, and central, even though it doesn't. So I drag my pins around, click on OK, and I've got a pin board. It looks like I need to make the picture a little bit larger, however, so I'll move it over here first a little ways. Make it a bit larger. Very crude manipulation at this point, but hopefully you can live with that. And there are other things you can do besides what we've seen already. We've got these things that they call, when I hover over them you'll see the definition, they call subscription buttons. I'm going to go to this radio button group, subscription buttons. I call them data controls instead. And it says, and I'm going to use data source 1 as my selection of members in which to display these radio buttons. And I'm going to select the market now, which I should have selected earlier, but that's okay. I'm going to click this Add button and add a few of my markets like East, West, South, and Central. Click on OK. Hang on, add one more. I'm going to add the total market also. So total market, East, West, South, and Central. Click OK, click OK. And now you see I've got a bunch of radio buttons here. Why do I care? Once again, I'll switch to Analyze View. And now watch the data here, watch the bars in the bar chart, watch the pins on the pin board. When I switch to East here, the numbers change, the bars change, and because everything's below 7,500, everything's going to be red for East. And I'll switch it over to West. The data changes, the bar changes, but the colors remain the same. I'll switch it over to Market. Now I'm back to my original data, and you see the bars change, and you see the buttons change, all related to whatever data control I selected here, or as they call it, a subscription. And one last item, there's this button here called Services. And when I drag that down to my document designer, I can do any one of these services. I'll create a very easy service right away. I want this service button, and it's going to turn out to be a button to bring up my print dialog. So it's already been created for me. There it's even got the name of print on it. When I go to my Analyze View and click my print button, guess what? I get my print dialog. Or you could use it for different things like, and this is just touching the tip of the iceberg here. I switch back to Analyze View. I'll drag on another service button here, and I can launch any executable that I want. I clicked on Launch Executable, and I'll type in calc.exe, which will bring up the calculator. Click on OK. I don't want the label to be Launch Executable, so I'll change that to Calculator. Click on OK there. Switch back to Analyze View, and when I press the Calculator button, the calculator appears. So that was the document designer demo of the different visual things you can do really relatively easily based upon the data you have available to you. Either one set of data or even multiple sets of data. I could have this spreadsheet going against one database and this chart going against a different database, and this pinboard going against a third database, etc., etc. But that brings us back to one last question is, what am I going to do with these documents? Well, there are a number of things you can do. You can print them. I'll switch back here, and I'll go to that print button that I just created, and I can print the entire screen. I can print selected objects from within the document, or just all of the objects within that document. So that's one thing I can do. I can export data. If I go back to one of my original ones here, and if I right-click here, you notice there's an export data command, and I can export to Excel, I can export to Word, PowerPoint. Notice that Word and PowerPoint, I can only export an image of that data, either a selected object or the whole screen. I can't really export what they call query-ready data. Let me do a quick export of query-ready data of this object. And what happens is that in Excel, the same data got exported here. Because I have exactly the same item here as I did in Excel already, they, of course, it looks like it didn't really export it, but you'll have to trust me that it did export that data and automatically connected me to the database that it was connected to in what I'm going to do now is do it one more time. I've closed Excel. There's nothing in Excel right now. It's an empty sheet there. Now if I right-click and export data to Microsoft Excel in query-ready formatted and go to Excel, there it's connected. It's shown me the data in Excel automatically, exported it, and it automatically connected to that database within SmartView in Excel. So that's a very handy tool there. And you can also export a document via a different export command to your local or network drive so that others can import that same document into their web analysis studio. And you can also exchange documents via something called shared services that you may or may not know about. So in summary, web analysis gives you a more visual display of your S-base data than is capable natively within SmartView via the in Excel. You can create spreadsheets, charts, pinboards, free-form grids of data displays. You've got various analytical tools like traffic lighting, sorting, top and bottom display, calculation definitions, and even more that can be applied to that data. There's also multiple methods of formatting the data and the dimensions, and I didn't even get into that at all to make your reports look nicer. And then there's the document designer that can be used to create documents with multiple data objects, display objects, data controls, and those service execution buttons you saw me create. And there are also multiple methods of document distribution. So that's it for today. That was about 45 minutes. Hope you stuck with me. And if in the future you have any questions about this webinar, feel free to contact me, Craig Messenring, at my email address or via phone if you'd like. And if you are interested in any of the services that HCG offers, please contact us at the phone number you see there or via our website, or LinkedIn, or YouTube. There are recorded versions of these webinars on YouTube, and I'm recording the one today. So, thanks for attending today, and I hope to see you in future webinars.